Life is hectic, demanding, and doesn't stop. When honest with ourselves, we must confess we often don't know what the hell we're doing. The Larkcast is an ongoing conversation about the inclusive and mischievous nature of God's presence through the lens of all the things that make up this phenomenon we refer to as life. Astonishing grace and refreshing honesty collide right here for your weekly encouragement.
3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to the Larkcast. You are tuning in to an ongoing conversation between Russ Johnson and myself, Tony Sorcy. Cheers to you, Russell. Good to see you.
Cheers, my friend.
My friend.
You're watching this video. You're watching me just cheer myself because I'm anxious and I'm getting energy out of my body. We prepared for this podcast.
Man, Russ is bringing it. He's got the energy today. Normally, if you had to gauge Russ based on his slow Southern smooth yet raspy voice, it kind of feels like he just stays in second gear. But he's he's bringing it today.
I feel like that was like a roundabout way of saying it's my friend Russ. It's not real smart, but he makes up for it by being slow.
Dude, you're one of the smartest dudes I've ever met. True story.
Oh man.
True story.
True story. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's us smart guys, man. We stick together, right? I think our issue is we also have like these other bones in our bodies that get us into trouble. So instead of like going and making like rockets that go to space and a lot of money, we instead make podcasts and write books and spend a lot of time talking with everyday people about the good news of Jesus, and all the while seeing people come alive in good news. Amen for this. But also, instead of attracting a lot of attention and making lots of money, we make people mad. That's been my story this week. My inbox is full of people who are furious with Lark.
Sounds like you really want to get into this. Can you tell us more?
Well, I was just kidding about that. There's just one.
Well, you're not kidding about your inbox being full.
That is true.
It's just coming from one person.
It's just coming from one.
It's just coming from one person who apparently has a lot of time.
Lots of time
to write emails. I'm like, bro, doesn't your grass need to be cut or grocery shopping?
I think Jameson said it best. He was like, somebody needs to check on this dude's kids, make sure they're still alive.
That's awesome.
I was like, kids haven't eaten in days. Yeah, man. It's been fun. I have found that, you write a book like we've done, right? And you podcast through like a Reclaim 1 through 5, where you're really unearthing what Jesus is really like, who he really is, what he's really said, what he's really done, who we really are in him, what life is really about because of him. Man, like and we've said it a million times, if you're at the end of your virtuous or physical or mental or emotional or financial rope, you seem to be at a place in your life where you start to look up. But if you're not, and you're hanging on to some myth that you're in control and you still got this thing, whew, bro, grace will just absolutely make war on you. Yeah. And the religious nature comes out with like claws, bro. Mm-hmm. Just like in the days of the crucifixion. And that happens, man. And we get people who just get up in arms. And one of the things that just keeps coming back between this and then Jameson's podcast series, which I'm just going to give a shout out, man. It's been fantastic. It's called What Must I Do? ? And it's a 4-part series. You got to start at the beginning. You got to work through it, right? Because it all builds on each other. But it's working through that question of all these various people that came to Jesus with, what must I do? And Jesus's answers were driving every single one of these people, all of them, to the same point. And he gives the same answer. Well, with God, what you must do is impossible. This life of grace, this life of faith, this life with me, yeah, it's one-sided. It's something I do. It comes from above. It doesn't come from within you, ever. And again, man, like, that's such good news if you're like at a point in your life when you realized it's Jesus or bust.
Right.
And that's a lark.
But that will wage war on everybody.
Yeah.
The both religious and even the supposedly irreligious.
Everyone.
Because, you know, like our religion just kind of rebrands itself in a variety of ways, and we put ourselves in the winner circle, not just spiritually, but professionally, personally, familially, monetarily, you know, a bunch of different ways.
It's a great way to put it.
But
it's
today
true.
we are in it's a good one, man. Chapter 8. Really kind of like continuing that conversation of like participating. Like, what does it mean to participate with God in the world and others' lives? What does it mean to join him?
Yes. I think that's kind of where my head was going, because right before we hit record, right, I'm reading another email from this particular person who's up in arms. And I just find myself going, man, there are like, we're not saying you're just a rock, do nothing, Jesus loves you, go lay in your backyard and sun, you know what I'm saying, until you die. We're like, that's the opposite of what we're saying. We're just saying that all that is needed to live and dwell with God is done from him. Rejoice.
The whole
recline.
You're, well, I mean, it's, what are we talking about? It's the age old knock of grace, which is, you know, licentiousness, lawlessness, you know, kind of a thing. Luther called it the impossible heresy, because you never really can escape the law. We've gotten into that. It's kind of baked into our world and it's baked into our hearts. But then the other thing is like the whole passivity, and like you're encouraging people not to do anything. And it's just like, dude, all we do is do.
Yes.
We like from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed, we're just constantly doing. Everybody's doing. Everybody. So I think we just, you know, we presuppose all of us do a lot of doing.
Yeah. Yeah. What we're getting into is the why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
We're getting into the forgiveness over all the failed doings, which are inevitable. We're showing you that your doing has no bearing upon your being in union with the God who made you to live in union with him.
Correct.
That's why this is called a journey of faith, not a journey of sight. And so seeing that, looking at that, I feel like I just want to say, which I'm saying to this person who's been reaching out, like, hey, we're all for inviting you to go jump into what Jesus is doing. But think of the beauty that comes when you get to jump into what God's doing just for the pure joy of it. Just because you've discovered what Dad's like and you just want to be where he's at and do what he's doing. No different than my 6-year-old is with me. Everywhere I go, he wants to go. Everything I'm doing, he wants to be doing. Right. Dude, I can be working in my office writing an email and he wants to sit in my lap and help write the email.
Yeah.
Because he just loves being with Dad.
Yeah.
And I just love being with him. And I feel like that's, to me, is what chapter 8 is about. Is if you're not careful, you can, let me just say it like this. I'm just going to say it out loud. You could spend so much of your life thinking and talking about spiritual growth and all these things that you need to be doing, completely missing the entire point of it and who you already are in Jesus. All right. Which means it's an inevitable, like, roller coaster, treadmill, merry-go-round, whatever you want to put in there, right? It's just constant navel gazing in which you never arrive But the more you think about it and the more you talk about it, the more you think you're arriving.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find other people who are in the same boat. And before long, you spend all of your days thinking and talking about spiritual growth while never actually joining in what Jesus is really doing in you and in the real world and in the people's lives around you.
Right.
But when you find freedom from that myth, that's Reclaim 1-5, and discover that you are the church in Jesus, Reclaim 6, and begin to understand what discipleship is, this beautiful ongoing conversation with anyone around you, believer and unbeliever, doesn't matter. The constant encouragement of life in and through the reality of who Jesus is and what he's done, right? Reclaim 7. Well, then you can actually go step into what God's doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's this chapter, Reclaim 8. We call it Spaces.
Yeah.
But again, if you're thinking anything of this is needed to belong, if this is needed for you to be forgiven, this is needed so that he loves you or he'll move in your life, you'll just undo it. You will turn everyone in and around you into a project, period.
Yes. Yes. And that's where, making the connection between our freedom and participation in, friendship, the ongoing passing on of good news and encouragement, and just being a friend, man, throughout all of it. Whoever's around you, whatever your circles are, your spaces, so to speak, that's what chapter 8 is called. It's called Spaces. Wherever you find yourself in the people around you and that love that you have in your heart for them, that comes from above. Freedom is a massive resource, is a massive reality for those ongoing conversations. Because if I jump into those friendships and I'm having these conversations so that I can be a practitioner, like a like a good
Right.
practitioner, I can go back to my other spaces with my my missional buds and talk about all these stories, so I can look guys, here's what I'm learning, here's what I'm doing, check it out, right? Or if you're like trying to really prove you're a disciple because you're a disciple maker, it's all for you.
Dude.
It's
How
all
many times have we
it's
heard
all
that?
for dude, 100%. It's all for you, and it's all about you. Love is for the benefit of another person. It's like a self-sacrificing thing for the benefit of another. You almost kind of get lost. You and your comfort or whatever gets lost as you are focusing on another. And freedom is the only thing that can really help us love with no strings attached and no fine print. And so I know we push back on freedom because we think it's going to lead to unlove, or we think it's going to lead to laziness. We're just not trusting the one who's declared us free.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's insane when you really think about it, but like the reasons people are up in arms about grace, okay, and the things that they're holding up, the signs that they're holding up of you are wrong and therefore you don't belong, are actually the testimony to their unbelief in the fact that they belong. And so do you. So the one thing that you can do that Jesus did, the one thing that you could actually step into, trust, right? Faith, to see the Father as he sees the Father, and to trust him as you walk through life. And it's the one thing that leads to all the other things that you get to go join into, right? It's that one thing they're not doing. Okay, it's the one thing I myself have not done in life numerous times while I'm holding up this, right, this imaginary like sign of, yeah, man, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Meanwhile, it's like, yeah, I'm just saying that because I don't actually trust him. Dude, that was such a like whack in my face, going, holy cow, I spent years pushing people to go do things to prove they're disciples, pushing people to go do things to honor God, pushing people to go do things for him because of what he's done. And all the while realizing I'm only doing this because I don't believe.
Yeah. Well, again,
dude,
it's the illusion, you can really talk yourself into, that you're the one actually doing it just by having the conversation. That was my environment. It was all about the latest, talk at a conference or the latest book or the latest theory or the latest paradigm or whatever. I found the church to be a unique place because you can get up and just kind of talk about things. If you have a whiteboard and some dry erase markers, you can talk about things that you A, absolutely fail at doing, or B, don't do at all. And everyone was like, holy crap, this dude's really smart, or this dude like really knows a lot about this. And you can just excel in that environment, even though you have, no reality in your life of the things that you talk about, because, it's all about it's you know what I'm talking about. It's maybe you can help me put words to it. It's
well, it's just one more way for you to try to assure yourself that you matter, that you're worth something, you're making a difference. That's what I found.
Yeah, well, it's just the idea of ideas and knowledge. It's very Gnostic in a ways. A lot of those like real like heavy theological environments, like I was in. Dude, you want to do a fast track to becoming an elder at the places that I used to be on staff at? Just be white, own a business, and quote a few reform dudes, and you will climb the freaking ladder, dude.
Yeah. And if you want to lead that room, gain enough knowledge that you can pull out that whiteboard, start doing some missional geometry on it.
Oh, dude. Oh, that was my story. I was like known as
that's what I'm saying. I'm not making fun of them. I'm saying that was me too.
Yeah, I was known as like the missional dude on our team just because I would talk about it a lot. And when I met you in 2014, I was like telling everyone else that they should like go love their neighbors. I had 0 friends outside the faith. I had 0 friends outside the bubble of the church. And so I'm telling everyone else, and everyone's looking to me like, oh man, like Tony knows a lot about this. And then we gather a lot of people and have these conversations. We're like, yeah, man, like all these other like old crusty dudes, these dudes suck. They're not about like being the body in the world, they're not about like being the church. Oh, but we were just talking about it. That's all we were doing.
Dude, it's
dude, it's just like, it's so crazy.
Yeah. So your story like is the evidence in a sense, right? It's kind of what you're showing is that because you studied and could articulate well and do all the geometry on a board and wow people with the knowledge and all the systems that they would need to make this thing happen for Jesus, you wound up at the top of the pyramid. And ultimately what you were saying is, I'm going to offer you guys 38 ways to move forward for the betterment of your city that will require no faith whatsoever. But you say it out loud and you're like, oh shit, like this
is so crazy.
But that was me. I mean, I did that and we saw cool things happen just like you guys did. And like, here's the thing I always tell people, God's gracious. He's just like that. So he seems to move in our lives and in the lives of other people, even in the midst of all of our undoing of things.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because he's good.
Because if you're not careful, people will go, well, man, you saw a lot of success you guys did in the places that you led. So the Lord, that must have been the way to do it. But my reason that I always point back to is like, well, more people will come to know Jesus in prison this year than probably any church gathering or list of church gatherings. But I don't think God's advocating prison as like his plan for someplace everybody needs to go to so they can come to know him. In other words, God just moves wherever he's at in the midst of us and in spite of us and without us because he's just that good.
Yeah.
Now, if you're listening, you're going, okay, this is a lot of foundational understanding. Like, where does the tangible chapter 8 come in? Just know we've spent this time saying what we've been saying because if you step away from any of this understanding, in my opinion, the spaces fall flat. They just quickly become just some way for you to make something happen instead of a way for you to join in what God's doing. And so maybe the quickest way I could explain chapter 8 in a nutshell is I took a hard look at what you see us doing in the name of church. Think Sunday gathering, right? Saturday night if you're cool. in some, place. And out of that, you want to get everybody and their mother connected into some type of a community, small group, Sunday school, missional communities, gospel communities. They all have different names, but some type of like smaller group setting, okay, where you kind of really get to know each other.
Right.
And then the hope is that these two things combined lead to a third space. And the third space is like you being a missionary in your everyday life. It's you loving on neighbors while you're taking out trash cans or helping a neighbor with their lawn, right? It's you fishing with some buds or, right, getting coffee with this guy over here or throwing a house party or whatever it needs to be. It's you learning to be this missionary. For some churches, it's all about like joining some local nonprofit, right? Where you're, serving food to people, just fill in the blank.
Yep.
And so it's three spaces, 1, 2, 3, Sunday, small group, out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look to the scriptures, the life of Jesus, like how he goes about spreading this good news, it's the opposite. You have to like flip it. He starts actually out in the community, in and among everyday people, building friendships, passing on good news, eating meals, drinking wine, right? Conversation.
Yes.
And people are grabbing onto this good news wherever he goes.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of that, so that's the first space, not the last space.
Yeah, he started with people.
Starts with
people. And a lot of ways, when you just read it, it didn't seem very methodical. It was almost just kind of like as he was going.
Yes.
A lot of conversations seemed very unplanned.
Yes.
Very occasional.
Yeah. He
not
doesn't
so
seem
much.
like
He's not working, he's not unfolding this papyrus slip of this, 3-year plan he's got.
No.
He's got mapped out.
No, it doesn't look like a Google spreadsheet written on some papyrus with a feather pen. So,
well, Jesus is God, so he could have just, he had a smartphone in his pocket. He just kept it hidden from everybody.
Just kept it hidden. Nobody knew.
So it could increase his efficiency.
But it
was real lowly for him on social media, but
yeah. Yeah, whenever they recorded the reels, he would make sure he hit it. Don't give this away. And man, I'm just laughing, dude, because it's just so much of my story, man. It's like so much of my story was just really well trained in the opposite way of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's like the best way how to put it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether to laugh or cry.
No, dude, I was the same. When I realized, a lot of things that we were talking about in Reclaim 6 and 7 about, most people's disinterest in church gatherings, I was like, bro, I'm spending my entire life, my whole week prepping and planning for a thing that the people who I really care about are never going to come to.
Yeah.
They're never going to come to this thing.
No. It's just when you think about the time and the money, the energy, the emotion, man, that's just spent, dude, week after week after week.
Those budgets, dude.
Yeah. And you just find yourself going, what are we doing? But I think that's it. That's why we start with, hopefully, that's kind of what we're inviting you into in chapter 8, is to start where Jesus starts and to let it just be that unnamed. There's no name for this. He doesn't have anything he's branding here. He doesn't have anything he's building here. It's him offering friendship and good news through conversations with food and wine as he's going. The Lord's leading. It's a faith journey. It's unplanned.
Yeah.
And there's just something beautiful about it.
Yeah.
And then out of that, you see Jesus kind of connecting further with people. So you've got this going to Zacchaeus' house for this more intentional conversation, because Zacchaeus is declared, right? Like this is like the Hugh Hefner of Jesus' day. This is like the playboy who's going, something's different here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about that story is, unlike us who would hide and maybe meet Zacchaeus on the side in fear of being canceled, Jesus out loud in front of the whole crowd points to the guy that everyone's canceled.
Yes.
And says, I'm going to your house today.
Yes.
We're hanging out.
Yes. Very,
But again,
very controversial, very scandalous.
and very unplanned,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, how many times does he tell us, I only do what I see my father doing? So apparently the father's doing something in Zacchaeus, and bam, here we go.
Sure.
So you see these like times where Jesus is pressed in further with people on the conversation. Think of that as like a second space. You know, that's kind of how we try to name this, just to give people some language that are coming out of the church world. Second spaces are just anywhere where you're connecting further with people that want to talk about the good news of Jesus, man. They might not believe, but they're interested. Amen.
We just
For
picked
me,
some,
that's beer.
we just picked some language that was familiar. If you want to call it blue space and green space and red space, however you want to call it. I think really what we're just saying is like, we start with people and we wait, like in Reclaim 5, we wait, watch, and walk. And this connects to not only our own kind of like growth and the movement of the Spirit, but also when it comes to discipling others. We wait.
Yeah.
We wait to see that movement,
Yep.
And I'll tell you, man, there was a starting in this, like moving away from, being the man, being a passer, and jumping into, this kind of work, this kind of like these friendships, and trying to like just deconstruct all that stuff, dude. You're wondering where 4 years of conversation in your front yard with your neighbor about craft beer and metal bands is heading. You're like, what? Dude, I thought you gave me a heart. I thought I was going to see a bunch of people like just repent and say yes to you. We're going to like plant this church. We're going to like see all this like cool movement. We're going to be able to like point to it. I was going to be able to raise a lot of money. We're going to start this thing, like show them like this is the way. And you're just like, oh, it's just a 4 years seemingly fruitless friendship.
Yeah.
Until one day where you start to see the movement of God in others' lives on the margins, and they start to ask those questions because shit's getting real in their life, kind of thing. And you're like, oh, okay.
Here we go.
It was a lot of waiting. It was a lot of waiting and watching, and you can grow impatient in that. This is not sexy work, dude. This is not.
No, you will find people that are eager day one, right? I mean, I've seen my house sit empty. I've seen my house fill up with 15, 20 new people in a matter of 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, like, you just never know what the Lord's doing in and around you, but it's not sexy. It's real. It's messy. It's relationships. You got people who are up and down in different places, right? In and out, depending on where they are in their faith that day. You've got people that you'll equip that will awaken to this or passing on good news, and they'll leave your house, and right, something else will happen over here and over there and over there. And you're not going to get to measure it all. You're not going to get to manage it all. You're not going to get to stand on a podium and get applauded for it all.
I would say you're not going to be able to document it either.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we've learned is that it's very, very hard, and I would say damn near impossible, to talk to your neighbors while simultaneously talking about your neighbors in other platforms.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
No.
So if you want to be the kind of like leader dude that like has your social media and you're doing your reels where you're kind of sharing what's going on and these kind of things you're doing and what you're learning, and you want to point to all the different ways, right? So all your donors and supporters or even followers and admirers can see all the cool stuff you're doing, while also simultaneously inviting new friends into who you are, which I would assume would be like, yo, dude, are you on Instagram? Hey, dude, are you on TikTok? Hey, dude, you on Facebook?
Oh, I love that in those smaller group settings. So, Russ, tell me about Rick, man. How's that relationship with Rick going? Well, Rick's struggling, as you guys know, and we've talked a lot about him in here, and we prayed about him, and like this thing's going on in his marriage. And sorry, Rick, that you're hearing this for the first time sitting next to me in this moment. But back to Rick.
Rick, we've been talking about you for the last 3 months.
But that's our whole like just crazy freaking weird perception. But again, it all starts with this people needing to make things known to feel good about themselves and effective. I've been there. But that's what drives so much of that. And the reality is, when you step into this, you're not going to get to promote it. Dude, we could probably pull in a lot more people and a lot more donors, man, if all we did was just tell the stories of all the life change that we're seeing in the name of Lark. But it's real hard to do that, man. And for those people to come and join in and feel a part of this, instead of like the project that once was, it's now going to be a part of the solution for the next project.
Right.
The whole damn thing just falls flat, man.
Mm-hmm.
If it's love that you're after.
Yeah.
And so I think here's the ending point. It all lands on like what we call like a third space, where you basically are just hitting a pause button. Think about it like I'm going through life, connecting with people anywhere and everywhere. I'm then probably going to be connecting a little more with people that are open to the conversations of Jesus and wanting to learn more. And then at some point, maybe I do go and circle up with some people who do believe, to celebrate good news, right? To, the Lord's Supper together, man, like around a table, like an actual meal. And that can be you with your spouse and your kids. That can be you, right? And just your spouse. It can be you and a girlfriend, a boyfriend. That can be you with a neighbor. That can be you with a couple buds on, at a break room table at work. Mm-hmm. It can be a house full of people. It can be whatever you want. The point is, the ecclesia, as we talked about in Reclaim, chapter 6, the ecclesia, that like when the church is gathered, mm-hmm. that can be anywhere and everywhere and at any time.
Right.
And that just seems to be the place where we hit pause. We encourage one another, as Hebrews 10 says. And amen for those times.
Yeah, we got a little cool kind of way you can kind of shape that, that gathering there, just on, eating, sharing a meal, also known as communion, being open to listening. Remember, Hebrews 10 said, don't forsake the gathering together, but all the more keep doing it and encourage one another all the more as you see the day drawing near. So yes, it says don't neglect that gathering, but it says, well, what's happening at that gathering is a mutual encouragement.
Yes.
And so be open to create space, not just for like, a talk or a sermon or, something like that. We're not knocking that, at all. You and I, both enjoy doing that from time to time. Mm-hmm. But it's mutual encouragement was kind of like what was in view there in Hebrews 10.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to run with the do not forsake the gathering, then you have to take the rest of the verse, which was a space where people would encourage one another around a meal. Because again, you're talking Hebrews, which is a persecuted people that were meeting underground in homes.
Yeah. I was just found it funny when people were like, well, it says don't forsake the gathering, together. I'm like, yes, I'm about that. I'm also about how it described what went down. And the thing you're telling me that I need to do every Sunday is planned to the freaking like nth degree, and there's no room for me to participate at all. There's no mutual anything going on.
No, there's a couple people doing things and the rest of us watching.
Yes.
And there's been a few times where people have been pretty abrupt with that, man, and they keep pressing you, and you eventually find yourself responding with, listen, man, I appreciate your heart in this, but you're telling me not to forsake this gathering and pointing to this passage, while all the while you every Sunday forsake that passage.
Yes.
So you might want to stop throwing this at people.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If you're listening and you're going, okay, you guys are talking about tangibly going about being the church, loving on people, discipling people, encouraging one another, just seeing people grow up in the Lord, in the faith, and seeing more and more people come into this life that Jesus has invited them into. Yes. And we're talking in chapter 8 about what that could tangibly look like in your everyday simple flow of life. So are there some nuts and bolts and some practical things that might be helpful to you there? By all means. It's not something that you can really explain well on a podcast. Again, grab a copy of your Reclaim if you haven't. It's available at the website, larksite.com, also on Amazon. But that's where you're going to find, again, like just some tangible helps into fleshing out what we've been talking about on here.
Well, and I feel like it's a pretty fluid framework that can ebb and flow no matter where, you are. This isn't
yes,
a service, in planning center kind of a thing, like, hey, do these exact same things. It's more just kind of like, I would say, even if we want to call it principle based kind of a thing.
Yep.
There's a lot of freedom in how, you shape this, and you and I have done a wide variety of versions of this,
Mm-hmm.
throughout the years. So I think if you're the kind that, if you're the leader type, who really wants to see broader movement, I think you'll find, some helps there on how you can envision that. If you're just an everyday person, who just loves the people around you, and just in your mind, when you picture this thing going, you just picture like 5 or 6 people sitting around a table. I think that, it could be a helpful framework for that too.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree, man. And I love that point you brought up, principle based. Just think timeless, simple things that we can step into.
Yeah.
Definitely not a checklist.
No.
It is not a manual.
You can turn it into
it would
that.
be it's the anti-manual.
Yeah.
You could turn anything. I mean, I've done it. You can turn anything into a checklist and a manual.
Right.
But feel free to not let it be that. Just let it be a simple framework for just how to go about being the church right where you are.
Yeah.
That's chapter 8.
Cool.
Reclaim.
Good chat, bro.
Spaces.
Spaces.
Good chat, man. Till next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.